So this session is focused on licensing and partnering agreements, and it is hosted by the NIA and NHLBI. Next slide, please. I'm delighted to welcome our featured speakers. We have Dr. Don Rose. He's the Entrepreneur in Residence from the National Institute on Aging at the National Institute on Health. We also have Joseph Nixon, Senior Vice President of Business Development, Locus Biosciences. And we welcome Dr. Ethel Rubin, Entrepreneur in Residence at the Small Business Education and Entrepreneurial Development Office, SEED, at NIH. And my name is Monique Laroque. I'll be your moderator. Next slide, please. So today we're going to do a brief overview on licensing and partnering agreements. So you'll see an entree to each of the breakout sessions and what we're going to be covering. And then we'll actually break out into those breakout rooms with Q&A, and we'll have panelists. You'll be able to ask very specific questions. There'll be 3 topics. Many of you have already signed up to what breakout room you want to join, and those are startup and university license agreements with Dr. Don Rose, partnerships and collaboration agreements with Joseph Nixon, as well as negotiation tips with Ethel Rubin. I will share in advance, although you have signed up in advance for those breakout rooms, you are welcome to move between rooms. And we'll go through a little bit more about those details at the end of our brief overview. Next slide, please. We're delighted to bring to you this entrepreneurship series. It is co-hosted by NIA and NHLBI. And our goal is to really offer research entrepreneurs and biotech small business owners key guidance, access to experts. We'll have these sessions taking place throughout this year and early next year. And we do know that there are many sessions that are ongoing. We welcome you to participate live, but we also have archives of these workshops that are on the NIA Office of Small Business Research archived events page. And we are very delighted that these sessions will have breakout sessions, but if there are things that you want to go into more in depth about, we are offering our awardees opportunities to have one-on-one conversations and to participate in coaching sessions. Next slide. These are some of the upcoming dates. You'll see in the chat, which will include that you can actually go ahead and register for the August 17th event, which is focused on value propositions and differentiation. We'll have another one in October on regulatory strategy. And then in the future, pitching, promoting the company, as well as investment funding. With that, I'd like to welcome Don Rose.
Thank you, Monique. My topic, my area that I'll be working on is the license agreements between universities and startup companies. And this is, of course, to license intellectual property that is that's being licensed from the university to the startup company. And I'm just going to run real quick through the different types of things that you'll see in one of these license agreements without really delving into any of them in detail. So we can certainly spend time during our breakout session to talk in more detail. But at the beginning of this and perhaps any sort of agreement that you'll see will be a preamble or definitions where you define certain things that are then used throughout the agreement. So what is a commercial sale? What is the field of use? What is a sublicense, and so on? Those are in the preamble and definitions. The next section is the grant, and the grant is really what the licensee receives for the actual. So if we could go to the next slide, that'd be great. It's what you, the licensee, receives or are granted as part of the license, and the key terms that you'll see in that section are: is it exclusive or non-exclusive? We can talk about that. What is the field? What is the territory? And do you have a right to sublicense? Those are the kinds of things that you'll see in your license agreement. And then the next slide talks about compensation. This is what the university or the licensor receives, sometimes called the consideration, in return for the license. And again, these are sort of both financial and some non-financial, but typically financial considerations or compensation. There's an upfront payment as part of the license, reimbursement of patent costs, both past and future, and royalties on any product sales, and so on and so forth. and then you've got, of course, milestone payments as well. And then there's usually a section on diligence, which these are to make sure that you, the licensee, is making progress. And these will be performance milestones typically. Some have financial things attached to them. So for example, they may say that you have to, if you achieve a certain milestone, you pay the university some money. But many times there are performance milestones that are shown here of raise a certain amount of money in a certain number of months, get FDA approval within a certain number of months, and so on and so forth. Next is kind of the control of IP. Just a reminder, the university will always own the patent, but there's always a question about what is, how can the university use the IP that's being licensed? And they typically can use it for research use only. There's something called federal march-in rights, which makes people a little concerned at times, but they're really of little consequence many times. And the two big ones are who's going to actually do the work to prosecute the patent, and what happens if there's an infringement of the patent. And those are key terms that have to be worked out. And then finally, there are additional terms that show up like confidentiality. So the confidentiality both of the company that's licensing the technology, but also confidentiality of any information that is being licensed that's not in the public domain. Things like publication of results, and a right to sublicense. You may have a technology you want to then turn around and license to another company. What does that right look like, and what are the terms associated with that? Okay, I'd like to now turn it over to Joe Nixon, who's going to talk to you about collaborations and partnerships.
Thanks, Don. Can I have the slide, please? Yeah, so I'm kind of speaking to the group, assuming that most of the attendees are either already part of a startup company that is seeking SBIR or STTR funding, or is interested in becoming part of one. And so I'll kind of speak, when I talk to you, I'm talking to the kind of the entrepreneur or the startup company. Don was just talking about sort of the university to startup company license agreement, which is often the first stage of getting a company going. But as a biotechnology company grows, often it's going to have other types of agreements with other types of entities as well. Locus Biosciences is a small biotech company, about 5 years old at this point, in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. And we've done a number of different transactions, basically all of these types and many others. And so I'll speak just a little bit to a few of the different types of partnerships that a small biotech company might have along the way. Don already was talking again about the in-license from the university. Locus in-licensed some technology from NC State University. We've also done several collaborations. We have a collaboration with Johnson & Johnson, for example, where we out-licensed a portion of our technology along with a research collaboration in exchange for an upfront payment, milestone payments, and downstream consideration. We've also entered into a research collaboration with another sort of top 5 big pharma company that really didn't have any license attached, but we really was just a research collaboration where that party is giving us some cash to do some research using our platform that will provide an answer, a scientific answer that they are interested in. And so these different types of agreements often will, can be combined. Sometimes there's a license and a collaboration. Sometimes there's just a license or just a collaboration. And we can talk more about that in the breakout if people are interested in the different types. Just to speak for a moment about the different benefits that a company would get from these types of agreements, though, the one that people think about most often is accessing resources. They think about out-licensing a portion of their technology to a big pharma company, for example, and out of that they want to get cash. But sometimes these relationships also provide additional technology. Sometimes they can bring in expertise. So, for example, the collaboration that we have with Johnson & Johnson, the J&J team is has been at times larger than our entire company. The team that's involved with the collaboration, and with experts in every field from discovery biology to CMC to commercial to, and all of the subfields within there. So that expertise is very important. And one thing to definitely consider when you're doing these types of agreements is making sure you have access to that expertise. Another important part is connections. And here I will actually say we have 2 government and quasi-government contracts with BARDA and with CARB-X. And in addition to the cash those contracts bring to us, the connections that those groups bring are also very important. And there are groups like, for example, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, where the access to the patient networks can often be more valuable than even the capital that comes in. Another big area, though, in addition to those resources, is gaining validation. Obviously, being able to announce a partnership with a prominent company, you can bring some notoriety, some attention to the company. It can also kind of validate you in the eyes of investors from a commercial or technical perspective. And so, sometimes, especially at an early stage, it might be worth taking a deal that might be a little bit less attractive financially in exchange for the right to announce it, for example, so that you can get the benefit of that validation. And then the third area that people often don't really think about too much is reducing risk. So being able to monetize a portion of the company value or the technology value early on, or more importantly, perhaps, especially if you have a platform technology, being able to increase the number of shots on goal. So because of the multiple partnerships Locus has, we have 6 active product development programs, which is far more than a typical company at our size and stage would be able to afford. Certainly much more than we could afford if we were trying to fund them all on our own, based on the very limited equity financing that we've raised. And then the other piece is really allocating risk among different groups. So by shifting some risk to the partner, you can be then willing or able to take on additional risk, maybe of an additional program that's maybe a little bit higher risk but higher potential reward. Just a couple of quick considerations, but again, we'll have a lot more of these in the breakout session. That quote there, which I understand is Niels Bohr, but sometimes attributed to Yogi Berra, prediction is very difficult, especially if it's about the future. The sort of saying in the industry is that the day you sign a partnership agreement is the day you start working on the First Amendment. That's not quite true, but it's not too far off. Things do change over time. It's very likely that you're going to be in a position to need to renegotiate an agreement at some point. The key is really to try to think ahead and make sure that you're not needing to do that from a position of weakness, where the partner on the other side is going to be able to extract a lot of value from you by the fact that you've failed to anticipate something important that puts you into a weak position for the negotiation. Secondly, and this is true pretty much in most parts of life and in business, but relationships are really what drives deals, and it's what drives success and failure. Certainly plenty of scientific projects, succeed or fail, but these types of agreements often are more driven by the relationships than by the science. Because sometimes if the science isn't working but the relationship is, there's a way to adjust the agreement, adjust the contract in order to take another swing. But if the relationship's going poorly, even if the science is going well, probably it's not going to be successful. And then the last thing, that maybe just one piece that's a little bit counterintuitive, maybe, is that bigger is not always better. It's not always better to have the biggest possible collaborator. It's not always better to have the biggest possible upfront check. There are other considerations, some of which are here on the slide, that they're also important. And one thing to just keep in mind is that the bigger the partner, the less important you are relative to the rest of their business. Sometimes it might be better as a university startup to do a partnership with a small to mid-sized biotech for whom the partnered asset would be a significant part of their business, rather than a giant multinational where it might be just a very, very small and relatively insignificant piece. So I think I'll pause there and hand it over, and then look forward to talking more in the breakout session.
Right, and I'm Ethel Rubin. Thank you for having me here today. I'll be covering our third breakout room, which is negotiation tips. I've been involved in the innovation ecosystem since I was a baby. Quite literally from the very beginning. I was a breast cancer researcher in my training, and my very first job outside of that was at a startup company that we spun out of Johns Hopkins University, and have since exited, thankfully, returning 10x to investors. So that was a very successful venture. But ever since then, I've been involved in various positions with large companies, with early stage companies, and with investors, and now working for the NIH Seed Office as an entrepreneur in residence, helping all of you, or SBIR, companies in the portfolio to prepare and connect with private capital and to go out there and get your licensing deals done. I wish I had some magical negotiation tips that are sure to succeed. And there are tons of business books about negotiation tips. Every single situation is different. There are all sorts of negotiation tactics that you will read about. Everybody will come in with what's worked for them in their situation that might not be perfect for yours. You're all going to have very specific questions based on what your technology type is. So if you're a drug, you're going to be talking about partnering for clinical development with big or medium-sized pharma. If you're software, SaaS, clinical decision support type of tools, you're going to be talking about licensing deals when it comes to your software. There were a lot of questions related to data rights when it comes to licensing or doing an STTR with a university. Everyone is a little bit different. I wish I had magical answers, but I don't. So I'm going to talk to you today about some general tips and tricks that have worked for me in over 20 years of transactions that I've been doing, every kind of agreement and deal you can imagine. So the very first thing I'm going to talk to you about today is educating yourself. You need to know the value of your assets independent of what the market thinks, because you're going to be approaching the market and coming in there with your hypothesis of what you're worth and testing it against what the market will pay. I cannot overstate the importance of preparing yourself in any negotiation with who's going to be sitting across the table from you. You need to understand what their position is, the kinds of deals that they do, how their deals usually work, at what stage of development are they usually interested in doing deals, who the people are at the table across from you. It's super important, if at all possible, to have confidants who can reveal to you some of their experience working with that company or with that potential partner. And then if at all, having internal champions. And I'm going to be relating some of the stories from my own experience of how useful that can be for a company. I want you to go into every negotiation knowing your ideal outcome. Again, what's the value of your assets? What do you want to get out of this? What are you willing to let go? What's your walkaway price? There is a term that you'll hear about, BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. At what point do you reach that BATNA, and what happens next? Knowing that lowest value, as I mentioned, is really important. If you don't have that, your negotiations can go on forever and will be totally fruitless. There's a term, what's in it for me, right? What's in it for them? On the other side of the table, why are they interested even in talking to you? What value is your asset for their portfolio? What pains or problems are they trying to solve, and what are their alternatives? There are some great probing tactics like asking open-ended questions. And before this call, I actually spoke to my CEO and I asked him, give me your one most important negotiating tip, because this guy is a deal maker of the deal makers. And he said, stop and listen. Just listen. Ask open-ended questions, listen to what they're saying, rephrase it, and just keep understanding their position. That will help you more than anything else. And then we'll talk about what to do if all else fails. I never want you to have all your eggs in one basket. You always have to have alternatives. So that's what we're going to be talking about in my room. Thank you for submitting the questions. I'll try to answer as many of them as possible. We're probably going to start off with at what point is it appropriate, or do you start thinking about licensing out? And we'll go from there. So I look forward to you joining me. And I'll pass it over now to Monique.
Thank you very much. It's going to be an exciting breakout period, so I really appreciate all of our experts here today. Again, I just wanted to remind you, if you like what you hear today, feel free to go ahead and register today for the Value Propositions and Differentiation Workshop. We will chat that link out again. Next slide, please. We are excited to share some new information on a new webinar series that's launching next week. There will be one, well, I should say, kicking off this week and moving on to next week. But there will be one on July 21st from 4 p.m. Great, Get There Faster, Therapeutics Development to CMC IND Submission. So we will include the link to register for that one as well. And please feel free to connect with us. We are here for you. I'm going to share contact information so that you can follow our community, but also send your direct email questions to our team. Our goal is to help you move along the continuum of commercialization development so that we can get new innovations to market. So we're here to help you succeed. Please feel free to visit the NIA and our website. I would also really encourage you to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. We'll post funding announcements, upcoming resources that are available to you. Again, our goal is to get you what you need and the tools you need to be successful. And we'll also have upcoming events and funding opportunities that will be launching soon. We invite you to join our mailing list. And again, please feel free to reach out to us with any questions. And next slide, you'll see the contact information for NHLBI. Again, you see our email address there, and you can visit all of our other channels as well. So now we're going to be talking about not only the breakout rooms, but what is available afterwards. As I mentioned, we're here to support you. And in addition to joining us on LinkedIn and Twitter and being available through email, if you are an awardee, we would love to be able to support you with additional one-on-one coaching. And if you are a potential applicant, we can help you figure out, what program, what institute is the best one to apply to, what are some tips for success. So please feel free to reach out to set up one of those one-on-one meetings. And now we'll move over to getting ready for our breakout rooms. You'll see that we have 3 breakout rooms. Again, you can see the title as well as who the expert is. So we'll have startup and university license agreements, our partnerships and collaboration agreements and negotiation tips. And Dr. Rose and Joseph Nixon and Dr. Rubin will be staffing each of those breakout rooms.